Hi, this is Misha, and this is part 3 in our series on Swiss straight pulls, where we're revisiting these guns because they deserve it. Part 1 was about the original rifles, being the 1889, the 89-96, and the 96-11. Part 2 looked at the famous or infamous Swiss Steyr 1893 carbine. And today, in this one, we're going to look at the short rifles and the carbines. This is a K11 or Carabiner 1911. And this is the one most famous in America. This is the K31 or Carbiner 1931. Both of these fire 7.5 by 55 GP11. And are, have some similarities and differences. Well, after the experiences of trying to develop the 1889 rifle into a carbine for the cavalry, they ended up adopting the K93, the Steyr 1893 carbine with a 21-inch barrel, but it had issues. They were already not really happy with it by the turn of the century, so they revisited this notion of, hey, what about making that Schmidt-Rubin design, the Schmidt action, into a carbine again? It didn't. The sacrifices did not seem so bad after the experiences of the 93. Now, the first one to come out was actually quite similar to this here. It was the 1889/00, or just the 1900 short rifle. This was designed for fortress emplacements, hence why it's sometimes called the fortress carbine, even though officially it was a short rifle. And it would not only be it would not only be introduced to soldiers stationed at mountain fortifications, which are obviously quite a bit and very important in Switzerland. It would also be issued to stationary artillery crews and bicyclists and other communications and specialist support troops. Now, what the 1900 short rifle was, basically, it was a Schmidt-Rubin action, an 89-96 action with the bolt lugs in the forward part of the sleeve, combined with a shorter barrel of 23 inches. Now, the barrel assembly and all that was very much copied from the 1897 single-shot cadet's carbine or cadet's rifle. But the 1900 had a detachable 6-round mag. And it still fired GP90, 7.5 by 53. But again, we're having the 96 action with the improved locking system. So they decided that, hey, cutting down the barrel wasn't such a horrible notion after all. And they would produce a good number of these. A little under 19,000. I believe it was 18,700, 750, somewhere in that range. But they would produce quite a substantial number from 1900 until around 1910, 1911. And they were quite popular with the troops they were issued to because they were short, light, handy, at least compared to the standard long rifle. 23-inch barrel, on the other hand, still delivers good range and accuracy, still gives you a respectable sight radius. And the Schmidt straight pull system was just better liked in Switzerland compared with the Steyr. Well, a short time later, the cavalry, fed up with the Steyr, adopted the 1905 carbine. Now, fun enough, it also had a 23-inch barrel. And it was a conglomeration of the Schmidt-Rubin or Schmidt action and the Steyr K93. Really what they took from the K93 on the 1905 carbine was the general stock profile and the sight arrangement, the rear sight. And they combined this with the same 6-shot mag from the 1900 short rifle and of course the same Schmidt-Rubin system. Now they would not make all that many of these, partially because they only made them for a few years until about 1910, 1908, 1910. They would do 7,900. Again though, the cavalry is a very small unit, small division, so that was more than enough to meet their needs. So these were the first short Schmidt-Rubin type guns to go into military service and to be produced in any numbers. And we don't find many today because of this gun here. This, the K11, is just like the 9611 or the 1911 from our first video. We still have the improved bolt system, and we've been updated with a new barrel to fire the new GP11 7.5 by 55 cartridge, and we have a new pattern of 6-round detachable mag. It is similar to those used in the 1900 and 1905, but it is different in a design. Now, like those, the K11 has a 23-inch barrel. We have a protected front sight now, unlike with the full-size rifle. Remember the 1893 had a protected front sight too, different style but same idea. We have the stacking rod bayonet lug here. The 1893 did not have a bayonet. We do have side sling mounts only. Front is a swivel, back is a bar inletted into the stock. Since this was a purpose-built K11, this semi-pistol grip was always part of the stock. It was not grafted on. And we have the slightly flatter butt plate, the same type of butt plate that the production 1911 rifles would have. Otherwise, we're the same. Same safety system, same Bakelite cocking knob, same trigger, all that. What happened to the 1900 and 1905s, they were almost all converted over to K11s. In fact, Jay's is a converted, I believe his is a one of the Fortress carbines, or Fortress short rifles. So that's why not really any of those survive today. They were all converted over, much like happened with the 8996 long rifle. Conversions would begin in 1912, 1913, and new guns would be produced, and they would actually make these for quite a long time. The final K11 type guns wouldn't come off the assembly line until 1933. And in total, they would produce 185,000. Pretty good number. Of course, you know, about 25,000 of that were converted earlier rifles. So, most of these were new production, but there are some converted. And these would be issued to a wide range of troops, from the cavalry to bicycle corps to artillery, both fixed and field, fortress, anyone needing a shorter, lighter rifle. In addition, this gave a lot of parts commonality with the standard 9611 or 1911 rifle issued at the time, and we have all the pros, and not a lot of sacrifice. I mean, yes, we lose a little range and a little accuracy with the shorter barrel, but so it goes. These were quite popular. In fact, so much so, but by the 1920s, this was the de facto standard issue gun in Switzerland. It was certainly the desired gun that people wanted to be issued. However, there was some reluctance. There was that sense of marksmanship. They were afraid if they went to a universal short rifle or carbine that they would lose range and accuracy especially shooting in the mountains. You know, you see something similar with America, although America acquiesced and adopted the 1903. Well, finally in 1929, the military said they would accept a universal short weapon if it was really not any longer than this guy here, and it had the same accuracy as the long rifle, the 1911. Oh, and by the way, make it cheaper. And that's where the K31 came from. Now, the earliest tests they were trying out, they did 200 K11 prototype guns with heavy barrels, but these did not deliver the accuracy they wanted, and they were heavier than they really desired. So what they did, they went back to the drawing board. It burned. In 1931, this pattern was introduced, and this is not at all really a Schmidt action, although it is obviously very inspired by it. This is a new bolt system, and we'll talk about the differences in a bit, but they went to a new pattern of bolt. This bolt is much shorter because for the first time we have the locking lugs at the actual front, you see here. So that big stem from the Schmidt action is finally gone. Doing that not only cheapened up production and made things a little easier, it allowed for a shorter receiver. And the shorter receiver meant we could put in a longer barrel while keeping the same overall length as the K11 carbine. Whereas this has a 23-inch barrel, this barrel is about 25.5 inches. 2.5 inches, not bad. I mean, you're looking at a 10% increase. But on top of that, they went to a new pattern of sight. Better sight. Front sight's quite similar. They also worked on free-floating the barrel to give better accuracy. And the barrel was made a little heavier. Not as heavy as the barrels in those prototype K11s, but heavier than on the standard K11. So you've got a heavier, more free-floated barrel, improved sights, a couple extra inches. This all meant that this gun was more accurate than the K11 and honestly could deliver the same mechanical accuracy as the 1911. The only real downfall, we don't have quite the longer sight radius of the rifle, so you know, there's that. But otherwise, we're not really sacrificing anything. Other changes. We have an improved 6-shot mag. It's both cheaper, easier to produce, and more reliable. We can still be topped off by Schmidt-style clips. We've gone away from the bakelite cocking handle to just a simple metal one. More durable, easier to make. We've improved the trigger. Of course, as I said, the receiver is a totally different design. It's much shorter. So since we went to a shorter design, we've gone away from the lightning cuts, as you see. It's just all slim back here. There's a step down. A little faster to machine there. We have the side sling swivels from the K11. And we have, again, a pretty flat butt plate. So this would be design created in 1931. It would be tested and adopted in 1932 as the K31. Now, interestingly, although K we would think of as carbine, this was officially a short rifle, so they really just like mixing things up. At least though this does have a longer barrel, which makes more sense. It is an intermediate length barrel compared to the true carbines and the long rifles. and this would go into mass production beginning in 1933. The first year production numbers would be quite small, but already by 34 they were ramping up. And they would build these things in quite large numbers throughout the 30s and into the 40s, and then slow down into the 50s, but they would still be producing them in limited numbers until 1958. They would make just under 530,000 K11s, so a significantly higher number than any previous model, at least double that. This was an extremely successful gun. It had the range and accuracy of a long rifle, but it was still quite light and handy. It was a great general issue gun. It was still expensive to produce, but they did do some economizations, as I said. Let's look at the bolts now. Now this K11 will have a standard 1889 96 pattern bolt. And we'll look at the new bolt. And I brought out the original Schmidt bolt 2 just for full comparison's sake. Let me just arrange things, guys, and be with you here. They were able to save some money. I know that sounds strange with Swiss guns because they are extremely expensive, but that's how it goes. The magazine and receiver were cheaper, and so was the bolt. Here we are with this. Here's the updated bolt. This is the 1911 style. Well, really not 1896, 1911 style. K31. Here's the original Schmidt-Rubin, 1889 style. In addition to the cocking piece changing, this piece here, the slide, on these earlier ones, this is machined out of a piece of steel. You see it's here. We have a cut here that both allows for takedown and lightning. On this, though, instead of being a machined piece of steel, we actually have sheet steel, a plate of steel, solid, thin, one piece. I wouldn't call this stamped steel yet, it's not really that, but it's still a lot easier to do. As I said, the locking lugs are at the front of the bolt, which just is infinitely better. Here we did move them to the front of the sleeve, which was good. But we still have all of this, which can flex, bend, everything else during firing to screw up accuracy and take away strength. But we're still better than this with the lug all the way back here, from here to here, which puts even more force. I mean, that's a lot of length. But we're going from this, from the chamber to locking lug in the very beginning, to this, where there's no difference. It's faster and easier to make. It requires less precision. If you look at the locking lugs on the original Schmidt-Rubin, they're not square shaped. They have a very interesting shape to them. They're very precisely machined. These are much more squared off. They're thicker. They're easier to machine, less precise. So, yeah. But they also give better accuracy because your face is right here, and better bolt durability. And this is still a very, very well made bolt system. And of course we're still using the same safety and all of that. Let me lay these out here where you can see them. You can see there the evolution of the Schmidt bolt. So the K31 really was a great improvement, and that's why it was so successful and produced in more numbers than any other single Schmidt, even though it wasn't really a Schmidt gun. They would do a few changes to these over time. The most noticeable, and the one that collectors look for the most, in 1946, they would change the furniture from being made from walnut to beechwood. All previous guns would have had the walnut, and they would go to beechwood. A little cheaper, a little easier to work, a little bit lighter. It's what they did, it's what they had. So after World War II, you'll see guns appearing with the beechwood. And of course, older guns that were refurbished with new stocks, or put into new stocks, would also end up with beechwood. So yeah, the Swiss K31, and we're still firing GP11 7.5 Swiss, which is still quite available today. Here's a very good round, still is today. Still used on a lot of Swiss shooting matches. These guns would start to be replaced in the late 50s by the STGW 57, the PE 57, which was a select fire weapon. So this was the last general issue straight pull in Switzerland. However, because of the way the Swiss system works, these would still see service up until the 70s. And even some reservists probably hung on to them longer. And of course later a lot of them were sold privately to the soldiers and other people in Switzerland. And more recently, many thousands have come to the USA. Back in the 90s you could find K31s, but they weren't the easiest thing. But then Century Arms imported a huge batch. Colorado Gun Sales also brought over some. So we have a good chunk of the K31s ever made are over in the USA. Those still over in Switzerland are generally speaking in private hands. There aren't really any left on the commercial market over there. And this really is the culmination of the whole straight pull design. This is the best straight pull probably ever fielded by a military. That said, it's not without faults, of course. It was still expensive to produce, at least compared to other guns of the 1940s. And because of its precisely fit parts in the receiver, it still does not do very well, say, in a conscript army. Now, of course, the Swiss military, the Swiss army, has highly trained soldiers that take care of their weapons, by and large. But say if you gave these to Russians, they'd probably have them jammed up in about 2 hours. And also because of the tightly fit parts, you might have more susceptibility to mud, dust, sand, dirt, ice, snow, anytime you have precision parts. But the trade-off there was you had better accuracy. So I think this was an excellent weapon for what Switzerland was looking for. But then again, each military kind of adopts, so at least hopefully adopts the weapon that best suits their needs. The Mosin Nagant very much suits the needs of Russia, for example. Well, if you have any questions or want to talk about your K31s, I know a lot of you out there have them. We'd love to hear about them. Please share in the comments. If you like the video, please click like. And also check out other parts in this series if you haven't already. If you have not already subscribed and could do so, we'd really appreciate that as well. As always, this is Misha, and we'll catch you next time.